The cellar door slammed shut above her head, and Mira Ashford heard the lock turn with a finality that sent ice through her veins. She pressed her palms against the rough wooden stairs, dirt and splinters biting into her skin as she strained to hear Marcus's footsteps retreat across the kitchen floor above. The house fell silent, the kind of silence that meant he'd left, that he wouldn't be back for days, that this time he truly meant to finish what he'd started months ago when his fists first found her face. Her legs trembled as she descended the remaining stairs into the darkness. The cellar smelled of earth and mildew, a damp cold that seeped through her thin cotton dress and settled into her bones. No windows, no light except the pale thread that crept beneath the door 20 feet above. She'd been down here before, of course, but never locked in, never left to die. Mira wrapped her arms around herself and sank onto the dirt floor, her back against the stone foundation. 3 years of marriage, and it had come to this. 3 years of walking on eggshells, of watching a charming man transform into something monstrous behind closed doors, of believing his apologies and his promises that he'd change. The bruises hidden beneath long sleeves told a different story. So did the cracked rib from last month, the split lip from last week. But this was different. This was murder, plain and simple, just slow enough that he could claim ignorance if anyone came asking. No one would come asking. They had no neighbors for miles. Just the old farmhouse Marcus had inherited from his grandfather, isolated in the Pennsylvania countryside. Her family lived across the country, and she'd drifted from friends as Marcus had tightened his control, demanding to know where she went, who she saw, reading her messages until she simply stopped reaching out to avoid his jealous rages. Tears burned hot tracks down her cheeks. She was going to die down here, alone in the dark, and no one would know until it was far too late. Hours passed. Maybe days. Time became meaningless in the absolute darkness. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but thirst was worse. Her tongue felt thick and dry, her lips cracking. She tried the stairs again and again, throwing her weight against the door until her shoulder ached, screaming until her voice gave out to ragged whispers. Nothing. The lock held fast and Marcus didn't come. Mira drifted in and out of consciousness, her thoughts growing hazy. Memories surfaced like bubbles in dark water. Her mother's face, the taste of strawberry ice cream on a summer day. The first time Marcus hit her, the shock of it, the way he'd cried afterward and sworn it would never happen again. And stranger memories, older ones, from childhood. Her grandmother, stern and strange, teaching her words in a language Mira couldn't place. Old words, dangerous words. Words her grandmother said were only to be spoken in the direst need, when death itself was at the door. There are powers older than the world we know, her grandmother had whispered, her papery hands gripping Mira's small ones. Powers that sleep until they're called. Most live their whole lives without needing them. But our bloodline, Mira, our bloodline carries a debt and a gift both. If you are ever truly lost, truly without hope, speak the name I give you. Only once. Only when there is no other choice. Mira had been 8 years old. She'd forgotten the words for years, pushed them away as the ravings of an old woman who'd grown confused in her final days. But now, in the suffocating darkness, with her heartbeat growing slower and her thoughts fragmenting, the words returned with crystalline clarity. She didn't believe in magic. She didn't believe in anything except the cold reality that she would die in this cellar if something didn't change. But what did she have to lose? Her lips were so dry they cracked as she formed the words, her voice barely a whisper, each syllable strange and angular in her mouth. Lysander Thornegate. The name tasted like copper and midnight, like something forbidden that should never be spoken aloud. It seemed to hang in the air, resonating with a frequency she felt rather than heard. Nothing happened. Of course nothing happened. Mira let her head fall back against the stone, a broken laugh escaping her throat. She'd lost her mind. Dehydration and fear had driven her to speaking nonsense words in the dark, calling out to nothing, hoping for miracles that didn't exist. She closed her eyes. The temperature dropped so suddenly that frost formed on the stone walls. Mira's eyes snapped open, but the darkness remained absolute. Yet something had changed. The air itself felt different, charged as though the space around her had become impossibly vast. She could sense a presence, could feel the weight of attention focused on her like a spotlight. And then there was light. It started as a pale glow in the center of the cellar, growing brighter, taking shape. Mira scrambled backward until her spine pressed against the wall, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst. The light coalesced into a form, into a figure, into a man. No, not a man. He stood nearly 6.5 feet tall, his presence commanding every molecule of space in the small cellar. His skin was pale as porcelain, luminous in the darkness, and his hair fell in silver-white waves past his shoulders. He wore clothing that seemed both ancient and timeless, a long coat of deep crimson over a black shirt and pants, all of it perfectly tailored to his powerful frame. But it was his face that stole her breath, beautiful in a way that was almost cruel, all sharp angles and aristocratic features, with high cheekbones and a strong jaw. And his eyes, God, his eyes! They burned like molten gold, inhuman and ancient, fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel transparent. "You called me," he said, and his voice rolled through the cellar like thunder, deep and resonant and tinged with an accent she couldn't place. "You spoke my name." Mira couldn't find her voice. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. She'd died already, and this was some final hallucination before the darkness took her completely. The creature, the man, the thing moved toward her with fluid grace, crossing the space in 2 strides. He crouched before her, bringing his face level with hers, and she could see the way his nostrils flared as he breathed in her scent. "You're dying," he observed, no particular emotion in his tone. "Dehydrated, starving, and you've been beaten." His eyes tracked over the bruises on her arms, the yellowing marks on her neck where Marcus's fingers had pressed. Something flickered across his perfect features. Anger, perhaps, or interest. "Who did this to you?" "I'm hallucinating," Mira whispered. Her voice came out as a croak. "You're not real." His hand moved faster than her eyes could follow, his fingers cold as ice gripping her chin and tilting her face up to his. "I am very real, and you are very much alive, though not for much longer if you remain in this place. You spoke my name. Do you understand what that means?" She shook her head, or tried to. His grip held her still. "It means your bloodline once made a bargain with mine. It means you carry the right to summon me, once in your lifetime, in exchange for a debt your ancestor incurred 300 years ago. It means, little human, that I am bound to answer your call and grant you aid." His golden eyes searched her face. "So tell me, what is it you desire? What need drove you to speak the name that summons the Vampire King?" Vampire King. The words should have terrified her, should have sent her scrambling away, screaming. But Mira had no fear left in her, only exhaustion and a desperate feral need to survive. "My husband," she whispered. "He locked me down here. He's going to let me starve to death." Lysander's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the cellar dropped another 10 degrees. "Your husband," he repeated slowly, "did this to you." She nodded. "And you wish me to free you from this place?" "Yes, please." He released her chin and stood, his head nearly brushing the low ceiling. "That is all? You would waste a summoning a gift that comes once in 10 generations, merely to be freed from a locked cellar?" Mira's throat tightened. She didn't understand what he was asking, what he was offering. "I just want to live," she managed. "I don't want to die down here." Lysander regarded her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he moved to the stairs, ascending them with inhuman speed. She heard the lock shatter, saw the door burst open, flooding the cellar with the pale gray light of dawn. He returned to her, and before she could process what was happening, he'd lifted her into his arms as though she weighed nothing at all. His body was cold against hers, hard as marble, but his grip was careful, almost gentle. "You need water," he said, "and medical attention. Where is your husband now?" "I don't know. He left. He hasn't come back." Mira's head spun as he carried her up the stairs and into the kitchen. Everything looked the same, normal. The morning light streaming through the windows seemed obscene given what had happened in the darkness below. "How long was I down there?" 3 days, Lysander said, setting her carefully on a chair. He moved to the sink, filling a glass with water, bringing it to her lips. "Drink slowly." She obeyed, and the water was the most beautiful thing she'd ever tasted. He held the glass steady as she drank, his cold fingers brushing hers. "He will return," Lysander said quietly, his eyes fixed on her face. "Your husband, and when he does, what would you have me do?" Mira lowered the glass, her hands shaking. "I don't understand what you're asking." "I am the Vampire King," he said, as though this explained everything. "I have lived for over 2,000 years. I have toppled empires and built new ones from their ashes. I command legions of the undead and hold dominion over territories that span continents. And you summoned me, bound me to your service through the old blood pact your ancestor made with mine. So I ask again, little human, what would you have me do to the man who locked you in the dark to die?" The weight of his words settled over her. He was offering her vengeance. He was offering her death for death. "I don't want you to kill him," Mira heard herself say, though part of her recoiled at her own mercy. Marcus had tried to murder her. Why shouldn't he pay for that? Lysander's head tilted slightly, his silver hair catching the light. "You surprise me. Most humans who summon my kind seek blood for blood. I just want to be free of him," Mira said. Her voice grew stronger as she spoke. "I want to be safe. I want him never to be able to hurt me again." "Can you do that?" "Easily." He set the glass aside and reached out, his cold fingers brushing the bruises on her arm with surprising gentleness. But you must understand, if I leave him alive he may come for you again. Human laws are slow and flawed. He could find you, hurt you worse than before. Is that a risk you're willing to take? What are you suggesting? Let me bind him. I can place a compulsion on his mind, a command that will prevent him from ever seeking you, ever harming you, ever even speaking your name. He will live, but he will be forever unable to touch you. Is that acceptable? Mira nodded slowly. It seemed impossible, but then again she was sitting in her kitchen talking to a vampire king who'd appeared out of darkness when she'd spoken his name. Impossible had lost all meaning. And then what? She asked. After you've done that, what happens to me? Do I owe you something for this? Lysander's golden eyes gleamed with something that might have been amusement. Clever little human. Yes, there is always a price for our services. The summoning grants you one aid freely, but anything beyond that requires payment. Her stomach dropped. What kind of payment? Nothing so crude as your soul, if that's what you fear. He moved closer, studying her face with unnerving intensity. But I find you interesting. You were dying in that cellar, yet you didn't call for revenge when given the chance. You show mercy to someone who showed you none. That speaks of strength, not weakness. So here is what I propose. Come with me. Spend 1 month in my home, in my world. Let me understand what drives a human to such forgiveness. At the end of that time, if you wish to return to your life, I will set you free with enough resources to start anew, far from this place and that man. If you refuse, I will still bind your husband and free you, but you will be on your own to navigate whatever comes after. The choice is yours. Your world? Mira echoed. You mean where vampires live? Yes, my court, my realm. It exists beneath and beside your world, hidden from mortal eyes. You would be under my protection there. No one would dare harm you. You would want for nothing, except my freedom. Your freedom to do what? Return to this empty house? Work whatever job you had before? Hide from your husband's family, his friends, anyone who might question what happened? Lysander's voice was not unkind, but it was blunt. You have nothing here but trauma and fear. I offer you safety, luxury, and time to heal. 1 month, then you choose your own path. Mira looked down at her hands, at the bruises and the dirt beneath her fingernails. He was right. She had nothing here. Even if he dealt with Marcus, she couldn't stay in this house, couldn't stay in this town. She had no money of her own. Marcus had controlled all of their finances, giving her just enough for groceries and gas. No family nearby, no friends who hadn't drifted away. And something in her, something reckless and desperate and tired of being afraid, wanted to say yes. 1 month, she said quietly. And then I'm free to go, no matter what. You have my word given on my name and title. I am Lysander Thornegate, King of the Endless Night, Lord of the Shadow Court. I do not break my oaths. There was such absolute certainty in his voice that Mira found herself believing him. Perhaps it was madness. Perhaps the dehydration had affected her judgment more than she realized. But what did she have to lose? Okay, she said. I'll come with you. Lysander smiled then, and it transformed his face from beautiful to devastating. Excellent, then let us deal with your husband and be done with this place. As if summoned by the words, Mira heard the sound of a car in the driveway, the slam of a door. Her whole body went rigid, terror flooding through her veins. Marcus. He'd come back, the front door opened, and Marcus Ashford stepped into the house, his dark hair disheveled, his shirt wrinkled. He looked tired and irritable, his mouth set in the familiar lines of displeasure that Mira had learned to fear. Then he saw her sitting at the kitchen table, saw the stranger standing beside her, and his expression shifted to shock. What the hell, Mira? How did you get out of the... He stopped himself, his eyes darting between her and Lysander. Who is this? What's going on here? Lysander moved between Mira and Marcus with preternatural speed, his tall frame blocking her from her husband's view. You must be the man who locked his wife in a cellar to die. Tell me, do you have any idea what you've done? What forces you've set in motion? Marcus's face flushed red. Get out of my house. This is between me and my wife. You're trespassing. Your house, Lysander repeated softly, dangerously. Your wife. You speak of ownership as though she is property. As though you have the right to hurt her, to imprison her, to end her life as you see fit. I don't know what she told you, but she told me nothing I couldn't see for myself. The bruises tell their own story. Lysander took a step forward and Marcus stumbled back, his bravado crumbling in the face of something he couldn't understand. You are a coward and a brute, and you deserve far worse than what I'm about to do to you. Marcus's hand moved to his pocket, and Mira realized with horror that he was reaching for something. A gun. He kept a gun in the side table by the door, but Lysander was faster. He crossed the space between them in a blur of motion, his hand clamping around Marcus's wrist with such force that Mira heard bones crack. Marcus screamed, dropping to his knees, and Lysander bent over him, his golden eyes blazing with an inner fire. Look at me. Lysander commanded, and there was power in his voice, something that made the air itself vibrate. "Look at me and hear my words." Marcus's eyes went wide and glassy, his struggling ceasing. Mira watched in horrified fascination as Lysander spoke to him in that same strange language she'd used to summon him, the words twisting and coiling in the air. Marcus's face went slack, his body limp except where Lysander held him upright. When Lysander finally released him, Marcus collapsed to the floor like a puppet with cut strings. He lay there for a long moment, then slowly pushed himself to his hands and knees. He looked around the kitchen as though seeing it for the first time, his gaze sliding past Mira without recognition. "Who are you?" he mumbled. "Where am I?" "You live here," Lysander said, his voice calm now, almost conversational. "But you live alone. You have never been married. You have never hurt anyone. Do you understand?" "I live alone," Marcus repeated. "I've never been married." Mira pressed her hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. He didn't remember her. Didn't even see her standing right there. "You will remain here," Lysander continued. "You will not seek out anyone named Mira. You will not remember anyone by that name. If you hear it spoken, it will mean nothing to you. You will live out your days in peace and solitude, bothering no one. Do you understand?" "Yes," Marcus said dully. "I understand." Lysander turned away from him, returning to Mira. "Gather what you need. We're leaving." Mira stood on shaking legs, her eyes still fixed on Marcus where he sat on the floor, confused and docile. Part of her wanted to scream at him, to make him remember what he'd done, to force him to acknowledge and apologize for the pain he'd caused. But another part of her, the part that was so tired of carrying the weight of his abuse, felt something like relief. He couldn't hurt her anymore. He didn't even know she existed. She moved through the house like a ghost, gathering a few clothes, her mother's necklace, the small amount of cash she'd hidden in the back of her dresser drawer. Everything else could stay. She wanted no reminders of this place, this life. When she returned to the kitchen, Lysander was waiting by the door. Marcus had moved to the couch, staring blankly at the television that wasn't on. He didn't look at her as she passed. Outside, the morning air was cool and fresh. Mira took a deep breath, her first real breath in what felt like forever. She was free. The realization hit her all at once and her knees buckled. Lysander caught her before she fell, his cold arms steady around her. "Easy, you're still weak from your ordeal." "I'm okay," she whispered, but she wasn't. She was shaking, crying, overwhelmed by too many emotions to name. Relief and terror and grief all tangled together. "Come," Lysander said gently. "Let's get you somewhere safe. Somewhere you can rest." He led her away from the house, away from Marcus and the cellar and everything that had tried to kill her. They walked into the trees that bordered the property, deeper and deeper into the woods, until the house disappeared behind them, and there was nothing but green and shadow. Then Lysander stopped, drawing something in the air with his finger. Mira saw symbols appear, glowing with pale light, forming a doorway where none should exist. "What is that?" she breathed. "A passage between worlds," Lysander said. "Between yours and mine, take my hand." She did, her small warm hand disappearing into his large cold one. He squeezed gently, reassuringly, and then led her through the glowing doorway. The transition was like stepping through a waterfall. One moment they were in the Pennsylvania woods. The next they were somewhere else entirely. Somewhere darker, lit by strange lights that seemed to float in the air without source. The sky above was perpetual twilight, stars shining but no sun visible. And before them rose a castle. It was massive, ancient, built of black stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Towers stretched toward the purple sky, and stained glass windows glowed with inner fire. It should have been menacing, but instead it struck Mira as breathtakingly beautiful, like something out of a fairy tale. "Welcome," Lysander said, "to the Shadow Court. My home. And for the next month yours as well." The castle was even more impressive inside than out. Lysander led Mira through halls lined with portraits of pale, beautiful figures in clothing from every era of history. Chandeliers of crystal and iron hung from vaulted ceilings, casting dancing shadows on marble floors. They passed through rooms filled with treasures, ancient weapons, priceless art, furniture that looked like it belonged in museums. And everywhere vampires. They appeared from side passages and doorways, drawn by curiosity to see the human their king had brought home. All of them shared that same otherworldly beauty, that same pale skin and elegant grace. Some had white hair like Lysander, others had kept the coloring they'd been born with, but all of them had eyes that glowed with inner light, gold, silver, crimson. They watched Mira with expressions ranging from curiosity to disdain to hunger. That last one made her press closer to Lysander's side. "They won't touch you," he assured her quietly. "You are under my protection. To harm you would be to invite final death." "Final death?" she echoed. "We can be killed, though it's difficult." Sunlight, fire, beheading, a stake through the heart, but anything less than that we heal from. He glanced down at her. Don't worry, I don't intend to let any harm come to you. He led her to a set of ornate double doors which opened at his approach. Beyond was a suite of rooms that took Mira's breath away. A massive bedroom with a canopy bed draped in silk, a sitting room with plush furniture arranged before a fireplace, and through another door she glimpsed a bathroom with a tub large enough to swim in. These are your quarters, Lysander said. Everything you need is here. Food will be brought to you, proper human food, don't worry. There are clothes in the wardrobe already tailored to your size. If you need anything else, anything at all, simply speak to the shadows and ask for me. I will hear you. Mira turned to look at him, this impossibly powerful creature who'd saved her life and brought her to his realm. Why are you being so kind to me? Lysander regarded her with those ancient golden eyes. I told you, you interest me. In 2,000 years I've seen humanity at its best and worst. I've watched empires rise and fall, seen countless mortals live and die. Most are predictable. You are not. I want to understand you. I'm not that complicated, Mira said softly. I'm just someone who made bad choices and ended up in a bad situation. Yet you survived, and more than that, you chose mercy when vengeance would have been justified. That is rare, Mira Ashford. Rarer than you know. He moved toward the door, then paused. Rest now. Heal. We'll talk more when you're recovered. After he left, Mira stood alone in the luxurious suite, trying to process everything that had happened. Just hours ago, she'd been dying in a cellar. Now she was in a vampire's castle in another realm entirely. It was too much, too fast, too surreal. She moved to the bathroom and caught sight of herself in the mirror. She looked terrible. Her hair was matted with dirt, her face gaunt and bruised, her dress torn and filthy. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her lips were cracked and bleeding. The tub called to her. She turned the taps and hot water poured out, steam rising. Someone had left soaps and oils on a silver tray, and she added them to the water, watching it foam and shimmer. When it was full, she stripped off the ruined dress and sank into the heat with a groan of relief. The water stung her cuts and scrapes, but it was worth it to feel clean again. She scrubbed away the dirt and fear, washing her hair 3 times until it felt like her own again. By the time she finally climbed out, the water had gone cold, but she felt more human than she had in days. The wardrobe held clothes in styles ranging from modern to medieval, all of them in her exact size, just as Lysander had promised. She chose a simple dress of deep blue velvet, soft against her clean skin, and braided her damp hair over one shoulder. A knock at the door made her jump. Come in, she called uncertainly. A young woman entered carrying a tray laden with food. She had the same pale skin as the other vampires, but her eyes were a brilliant silver, and her white hair was cut in a sleek bob. She wore modern clothing, jeans, and a silk blouse, which somehow made the whole situation feel even more surreal. I'm Seraphine, she said, setting the tray on a table near the fireplace. I've been asked to attend to you during your stay. If you need anything, I'm at your service. Thank you, Mira said, eyeing the food. There was bread and cheese, fruit, roasted chicken, vegetables, a carafe of wine. Her stomach growled audibly. This looks amazing. Seraphine smiled, revealing the tips of fangs. His Majesty was quite specific about ensuring you were well cared for. He's taken a personal interest in your welfare, which is unusual. How? The king doesn't often interact directly with humans. He has advisors for that, servants, intermediaries. For him to personally summon a human to the court, to declare them under his protection, and to attend to their needs himself. She trailed off, studying Mira with open curiosity. Well, it's been centuries since anything like this happened. Everyone's talking about it. Mira sat down at the table and began to eat, trying to pace herself even though she wanted to devour everything in sight. I summoned him, she explained between bites. There was a blood pact or something. My ancestor made a deal. Ah, the old contracts, yes, those still hold power. But even so, he could have sent someone else to answer the summons. The fact that he came himself, that he brought you here. Seraphine shook her head. You must be very important somehow, or very interesting to him. He said something similar. Mira paused with a piece of bread halfway to her mouth. Is that a bad thing? That depends entirely on what he wants from you. Seraphine moved toward the door. I'll return later to see if you need anything else. For now, rest. You're safe here. After she left, Mira finished eating and then collapsed onto the massive bed. The mattress was soft as a cloud, the pillows stuffed with down, and the silk sheets felt like water against her skin. She meant to stay awake, to think about everything that had happened, to plan what came next. Instead, she fell asleep within seconds and didn't wake for 16 hours. When she finally opened her eyes, the suite was lit by the soft glow of the floating lights she'd seen throughout the castle. Through the window, the sky was the same perpetual twilight it had been when she arrived. No day or night here, apparently. Just eternal dusk. She rose and found that someone had left fresh clothes laid out on a chair, along with another tray of food. She ate, dressed in black pants and a soft gray sweater, and then ventured out of her room, curiosity overcoming caution. The halls were quieter now, though she occasionally passed other vampires who nodded politely, or watched her with open interest. She explored corridors lined with artwork, discovered a library that seemed to stretch on forever, and found a garden that somehow existed inside the castle, plants growing in the eternal twilight with no need for sun. "You're awake," a familiar voice said behind her. Mira turned to find Lysander watching her from the garden entrance. He'd changed clothes, now wearing a simple black shirt and pants that somehow looked elegant on his tall frame. His silver hair was pulled back, revealing the sharp planes of his face. "I slept for a long time," she said. "You needed it. You were exhausted and traumatized. Sleep is how humans heal." He moved into the garden, joining her beside a fountain carved from black stone. "How do you feel?" "Better." "Confused." "This place is." She gestured helplessly at their surroundings. "It's not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Coffins and cobwebs." She laughed despite herself. "Maybe, I don't know. I never thought vampires were real, so I never thought about what their homes might look like. We're very real, and we prefer comfort as much as any living creature." Lysander plucked a flower from a nearby bush, a strange bloom that glowed with pale luminescence. "We've had centuries to accumulate beauty and wealth. Why should we live in squalor simply because we're dead?" "Are you?" "Dead? I mean, yes and no. Our hearts don't beat. We don't age. We require blood to survive, but we think, feel, remember. We're not corpses shambling through eternity. We're simply changed." He offered her the flower, and she took it, surprised by the gesture. "Tell me about yourself, Mira Ashford. Who were you before you became a woman trapped in a cellar?" It was a strange question, made stranger by the genuine interest in his golden eyes. They walked through the garden as she spoke, telling him about her childhood in California, her parents who'd divorced when she was young, her grandmother who'd raised her and filled her head with old stories, about moving to Pennsylvania for college and meeting Marcus, who'd seemed charming and stable after a lifetime of uncertainty. About the wedding, the slow realization that she'd made a mistake, the escalating violence. "I kept thinking it would get better," she said quietly. "That he would change, that I could fix it somehow. I was so stupid." "You were hopeful," Lysander corrected. "That's not stupidity, it's humanity. You wanted to believe in the best of someone, even when they showed you their worst, and look where that got me. It got you here. Alive. Free, starting anew." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "You saved yourself, Mira. You spoke the name when you had every reason to simply give up. That takes strength." His words settled over her like a warm blanket, soothing something deep inside that had been wounded and afraid. When was the last time anyone had called her strong? When had anyone looked at her the way Lysander was looking at her now, with respect and interest rather than contempt or pity? "Thank you," she whispered. They spent the next few days in similar fashion. Lysander would find her exploring the castle, and they would talk, long conversations that ranged from philosophy to history to the simple pleasures of existence. He told her about his life, about the centuries he'd lived and the changes he'd witnessed, about the vampire courts and their complex politics, about the shadow court he ruled and the rival courts that challenged his power, about the loneliness of immortality, watching everyone you might care about age and die while you remained unchanged. "Do you ever regret it?" Mira asked one evening as they sat in the library, her curled in an armchair while he stood by the window. "Being a vampire? Sometimes. When I remember what it felt like to stand in sunlight. When I see humans loving each other and know that kind of mortal passion is lost to me." He glanced at her. "But immortality has its compensations. I've seen wonders that no brief human life could encompass. I've had time to master skills, to accumulate knowledge, to shape the world in ways both subtle and profound. Don't you get bored?" "Occasionally. That's why I'm glad you're here. You're not boring." She felt her cheeks heat at the compliment. Over the past week, she'd grown comfortable with Lysander in a way she'd never been comfortable with Marcus. The Vampire King was dangerous, yes, and inhuman, but he was also unfailingly courteous. He listened when she spoke. He asked her opinions and seemed to genuinely care about her answers. He made her feel valued in a way she'd almost forgotten was possible. And he was beautiful. She tried not to think about that. Tried not to notice the way her heart beat faster when he entered a room, the way her skin tingled when he stood too close. It was ridiculous. He was a 2,000-year-old vampire and she was a traumatized human who'd just escaped an abusive marriage. Whatever attraction she felt was surely just her damaged psyche latching onto the first person to show her genuine kindness. But then she would catch him watching her with those golden eyes, his expression unreadable but intense, and she wondered if maybe possibly he felt something too. The 10th night of her stay, Lysander invited her to attend court. Court? She echoed as Seraphine helped her into a gown of deep burgundy silk, far more elaborate than anything she'd worn so far. The formal gathering of the Shadow Court, Seraphine explained, adjusting the dress's corset. All the high-ranking vampires in His Majesty's service attend. They conduct business, settle disputes, and generally engage in the political maneuvering that keeps vampire society from descending into chaos. And he wants me there? Apparently. It's highly unusual. Humans aren't typically invited to court functions. Seraphine stepped back, examining her work. You look beautiful. Try not to let anyone intimidate you. They'll test you, see if you're weak. Don't show fear. Easy to say, harder to do. When Mira entered the throne room on Lysander's arm an hour later, she felt like every eye in the vast chamber was fixed on her, and they were. Hundreds of vampires, all dressed in finery ranging from medieval gowns to modern suits, all turning to stare at the human their king had brought to court. The throne room was magnificent, a cathedral-like space with soaring ceilings and stained glass windows depicting battles between vampires and various enemies. At the far end, on a dais of black marble, sat an elaborate throne carved from a single piece of obsidian. Lysander led her to a smaller chair beside the throne, clearly placed there for her benefit. Sit, he murmured. You're my guest of honor tonight. Let them look. She sat, trying to keep her spine straight and her expression calm despite her racing heart. Lysander took his throne, and the murmur of conversation in the room died to silence. Welcome, Lysander said, his voice carrying effortlessly through the chamber. We have much to discuss tonight. But first I would introduce you to Mira Ashford, who has invoked the ancient rites and claimed sanctuary in my court. She is under my protection, and any who harm her will answer to me personally. Is that understood? A chorus of agreement rippled through the crowd, though Mira saw more than a few contemptuous looks directed her way. The business of court was fascinating and bewildering in equal measure. Vampires came forward to present grievances, request permissions, report on various activities throughout the realm. Lysander listened to each with patience, rendering judgments that seemed fair even when they were harsh. He commanded absolute authority, his word clearly law, yet he never seemed tyrannical, just regal, powerful. In his element, Mira found herself mesmerized watching him work. You stare at him like you're falling in love, a voice said beside her. Mira jerked, turning to find a vampire woman standing next to her chair. She was stunning, with pale skin and hair the color of midnight, her eyes burning crimson. She wore a gown of black lace that left little to the imagination. I don't, Mira started. Oh please, I've lived 800 years, I know what desire looks like. The woman leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. I'm Isabeau. I've known Lysander for 5 centuries. We were lovers once, did he tell you that? Mira's stomach dropped, though she had no right to feel jealous. No. But it's none of my business, isn't it? You're living in his castle, eating his food, sleeping in rooms he prepared for you. You've captured his attention in a way I haven't seen in decades. That makes it very much your business. Isabeau's smile was sharp. Just be careful, little human. Lysander doesn't love, he can't. Whatever you think you're feeling, whatever you hope might happen, remember that he's incapable of the emotions you crave. He's a predator, your prey. That's all you'll ever be to him. She drifted away before Mira could respond, disappearing into the crowd. Her words echoed in Mira's mind for the rest of the evening, sowing doubts she couldn't quite shake. After court ended and they returned to Mira's quarters, Lysander seemed to sense her troubled mood. What's wrong? He asked, following her into the sitting room despite not being explicitly invited. Nothing. I'm just tired. You're lying. You do this thing with your hands when you're upset, twisting them together. He caught her fingers, stilling them. What happened? One of your vampires spoke to me. Isabeau, she said. Mira stopped, not sure how to voice what was bothering her. Isabeau talks too much, Lysander said darkly. What did she tell you? That you were lovers once and that you can't feel love. That I'm just prey to you. Mira pulled her hands free, wrapping her arms around herself. Is that true? Lysander was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. Isabeau and I did have a relationship centuries ago. It ended because we wanted different things. As for the rest, he moved to the window, his back to her. Vampires don't experience emotion the way humans do. We're muted, distant from the immediacy of mortal feeling. Love, as you understand it, is difficult for us. Not impossible, but rare. Very rare. So she's right. You can't love me. I didn't say that. He turned, his golden eyes intense. I said it's difficult, rare. But Mira, in the 2 weeks you've been here, I've felt more than I have in the past century. Your presence disturbs my equilibrium. Your thoughts fascinate me. Your strength and resilience make me want to know everything about you. I don't know if that's love. I don't know if I'm capable of defining it the way you would. But it's something. Mira's heart hammered in her chest. What are you saying? I'm saying that you're not prey to me. You're not a curiosity I'll discard when I grow bored. He stopped, seeming to struggle for words, this ancient being who commanded legions and ruled kingdoms. Important. You've become important to me. She crossed the space between them before she could second-guess herself, looking up into his face. You're important to me too. You saved my life. You've shown me more kindness in 2 weeks than my husband did in 3 years. I feel safe with you. I feel seen, and I know it's probably just trauma bonding or Stockholm Syndrome or something, but I don't care. I like being with you. I like talking to you. He kissed her. It was sudden and intense, his cold lips claiming hers with a hunger that stole her breath. His hands came up to frame her face, holding her still as he deepened the kiss, and Mira melted into him, her fingers clutching at his shirt. He tasted like winter and darkness and something indefinably other, but his mouth moved against hers with perfect skill, centuries of experience evident in every touch. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard, his eyes blazing with golden fire. I shouldn't have done that, he said roughly. You're vulnerable. You've been through hell. I'm taking advantage. You're not. Mira insisted, her hands still fisted in his shirt. I kissed you back. I wanted you to kiss me. I've wanted it for days. You don't know what you're saying. You don't understand what it means to be with one of my kind. Then explain it to me. Lysander searched her face, conflict clear in his expression. If we do this, if we pursue this attraction, it will change everything. The bond between a vampire and their chosen human is intense, possessive. I would want all of you, Mira, your time, your attention, your blood, and you would be tied to me, to this realm, in ways that might make leaving difficult even after your month is up. Is that what you want? The rational part of her brain screamed that this was too fast, too much, too complicated. She'd just escaped one controlling relationship. Why would she rush into another, especially with someone who wasn't even human? But the rest of her, the part that had come alive in these past 2 weeks, that had remembered what it felt like to laugh and be curious and feel something other than fear, wanted him with an intensity that shocked her. I don't know about the blood thing, she said honestly. That scares me. But yes, I want this. I want you. However much time we have, whatever this becomes, I want to see where it goes. Even knowing I might not be able to love you the way you deserve. Even knowing that. Maybe especially knowing that because at least you're honest about it. She reached up, touching his face, feeling the cool marble of his skin under her palm. Marcus told me he loved me every day while he hurt me. You've never lied to me once, even when the truth is complicated or uncomfortable. That matters more than pretty words. Lysander turned his head, pressing a kiss to her palm. You humble me, Mira Ashford. You've survived horrors and yet you still have hope, still have trust to give. I don't deserve it, but I'll try to be worthy of it. He kissed her again, slower this time, tender in a way that made her chest ache. Then he swept her into his arms and carried her to the bedroom, laying her on the silk sheets with reverent care. Are you certain? He asked one last time. Yes, she breathed. What followed was unlike anything Mira had experienced. Lysander was patient and thorough, taking his time to explore her body with hands and mouth and the occasional graze of fangs that sent shivers through her. He learned what made her gasp, what made her arch against him, and he used that knowledge with devastating skill. When they finally came together, it was intense and overwhelming in the best way. His cold skin against her warmth, his strength carefully leashed so as not to hurt her, his golden eyes never leaving her face. He made her feel cherished and desired and powerful all at once. Afterward, she lay curled against his chest, her fingers tracing idle patterns on his skin. Does your heart truly not beat? She asked drowsily. No. That stopped the night I died 1700 years ago. His hands stroked through her hair. Does it bother you? It should, I think. But it doesn't. You're still you, beating hard or not. Sleep, he murmured. I'll stay with you until you wake. She drifted off, feeling safer than she had in years. The next 2 weeks passed in a haze of happiness Mira had never thought possible. She and Lysander were inseparable, spending their days exploring the castle and grounds, their nights learning each other in every way possible. He introduced her to the workings of his realm, taught her about vampire culture and history, listened to her thoughts and opinions as though they mattered, and slowly, carefully, he taught her about feeding. It doesn't have to be violent, he explained one evening as they sat by the fire in his private chambers. It can be intimate, pleasurable even for both parties. The vampire's bite releases chemicals that create euphoria in the donor. It's why humans can become addicted to it. Show me, Mira said impulsively. His eyes darkened. Are you certain? Once I've tasted you, the bond between us will strengthen. It may make leaving more difficult when your month is up. She'd been trying not to think about that. They had less than a week left on their agreement, and she still didn't know what she would do when the time came. Return to the human world? Stay here with Lysander? Both options seemed fraught with complications. I'm certain, she said, pushing those thoughts away. I trust you. Lysander pulled her into his lap, positioning her so she straddled his thighs. He swept her hair aside, exposing the curve of her neck, and pressed a kiss there that made her shiver. Tell me if it's too much, he murmured against her skin. Tell me to stop and I will, she nodded, her breath coming faster as anticipation built. Then she felt the sharp sting of his fangs piercing her skin, a brief pain that melted almost instantly into the most exquisite pleasure she'd ever experienced. It was like every nerve in her body lit up at once. Warmth flooded through her, building and building until she was trembling in his arms, gasping his name. She felt his groan vibrate against her throat as he drank, felt the possessive way his hands gripped her hips. When he finally pulled back, sealing the wound with his tongue, she was dazed and boneless, slumped against his chest. That was, she started, then couldn't find words. Intimate, he finished, his voice rough. Powerful. You taste like sunshine and hope, things I haven't experienced in centuries. He kissed her deeply, letting her taste her own blood on his lips. Thank you for that gift. The bond between them intensified after that night. Mira could feel Lysander even when they were apart, a constant awareness of his presence that was both comforting and unsettling. She found herself craving his touch, his attention, his bite, and from the way he watched her with hungry golden eyes, she knew he felt the same pull. One more day, Seraphine said quietly, as she helped Mira dress on the final morning of the agreed month. Tomorrow you have to choose. I know, Mira said softly. What will you do? I don't know. I care about him, Seraphine, more than I thought possible. But I also don't know if I'm ready to give up the sun forever, to give up being human. Is that selfish? It's honest. Seraphine finished lacing up the back of Mira's dress. For what it's worth, I think he loves you. I know he says he can't, that vampires don't feel that way. But I've served him for 300 years, and I've never seen him like this. Never seen him put someone else's needs before his own power and comfort. That has to mean something. It did mean something. But was it enough? Lysander found her in the garden that evening, her favorite place in the castle. She was sitting by the fountain, trailing her fingers in the water, trying to sort through her tangled thoughts. Tomorrow, he said, sitting beside her. Your month is complete, I know. Have you decided what you want to do? Mira looked up at him, this beautiful, impossible creature who'd become her whole world in 4 short weeks. I want to stay. But I'm afraid of what? Of losing myself. Marcus controlled everything about my life, and I swore I'd never let anyone have that power over me again. But if I stay here, if I let this bond deepen, won't I just be trading one cage for another? Lysander was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was measured, careful. I can't pretend that being with me wouldn't change your life. The bond is possessive by nature. I would want you close, would struggle with you being in danger or unhappy. But Mira, I would never lock you away. I would never hurt you. You would still be your own person, still have choices and freedom and autonomy. The difference is you'd have someone who cherished you while you exercised those choices. And if I wanted to see the sun again, to visit the human world, then we would find a way to make that possible. There are protections I can place on you, ways to let you move between realms safely. I would never ask you to give up your humanity entirely. He took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. But I won't lie to you, I want you to stay. I want more time with you. I want to see where this goes, what we could become to each other. Not because I own you, but because I choose you, and I hope you might choose me back. Tears stung Mira's eyes. What if it doesn't work? What if I stay and we realize we're too different, that this was just circumstance and proximity? Then I keep my promise. I let you go with enough resources to build a new life. I don't trap you here against your will. His golden eyes searched her face. You have to trust me, Mira. I know trust is hard for you after what Marcus did, but I'm not him. I will never be him. She believed him. That was the terrifying, wonderful truth. She believed him. Okay, she whispered. I'll stay. For now. Not forever, not yet, but for now. Let's see what happens. The joy that lit up Lysander's face was breathtaking. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and for the first time she felt his heart beat against her chest, just once. A single pulse. She pulled back, startled. Your heart, I know. He looked as shocked as she felt. I don't understand. That hasn't happened since I turned. It's not possible. But it did happen. I felt it. They stared at each other, the implications hanging heavy between them. Could he love her? Could that distant, muted vampire emotion be kindling into something more? Neither of them knew, but the possibility was enough. The months that followed were the happiest of Mira's life. She settled into life in the Shadow Court, learning its customs and politics, making friends among the vampires who'd initially viewed her with suspicion. She discovered she had a talent for diplomacy, for mediating disputes and finding compromise, and Lysander began including her in court business as an unofficial advisor. She also began learning about her own heritage. The blood pact her ancestor had made with Lysander's line turned out to be more complex than anyone had initially realized. Her family carried latent magical ability, a gift for compelling truth and binding oaths. It was why the summoning had worked, why Lysander had come himself rather than sending a proxy. She was important, not just to him but to the preservation of the ancient contracts that kept vampire society stable. You could be powerful in your own right, Lysander told her one night as they lay tangled together in his massive bed. If you wanted to train, to develop your gifts, you could be a force in this world. I don't want power, Mira said, tracing the planes of his chest with her fingertips. I just want to be happy, to feel safe, to be with you. You have all of that. He caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. But you could have more, you deserve more, she considered it. For so long she'd made herself small, tried to take up as little space as possible to avoid Marcus's anger. The idea of being powerful, of having agency and influence was intoxicating. Maybe, she said slowly, maybe I'll try, but not because I want to rule or control, because I want to help. There are other humans who've bonded with vampires, right? Other mortals living in this realm? I could advocate for them, make sure they're treated fairly. Lysander's smile was full of pride. You continually surprise me, Mira Ashford. Yes, you could do exactly that. I'll support you however you need. She began training with a vampire named Cassian who specialized in teaching mortals to access their magical potential. It was hard work, frustrating and exhausting, but also exhilarating. She learned to speak words of power, to weave compulsions and shields, to sense truth from lies. Her abilities were raw but growing stronger every day. And through it all, her bond with Lysander deepened. His heart beat more frequently when they were together now, nearly a regular rhythm when they made love. He grew more expressive, more openly affectionate, letting down walls he'd built over 2 millennia. He still wasn't fully human in his emotions, but he was changing, adapting, becoming something new. They were both becoming something new. 6 months after Mira's original summoning, trouble arrived in the form of an emissary from the rival Night Court. The vampire was ancient and powerful, his eyes burning crimson, his white hair worn long and loose. He brought a message from his king, challenging Lysander's claim to certain territories and, more importantly, questioning his fitness to rule now that he'd bonded with a human. Your infatuation has made you weak, the emissary declared in open court, his voice carrying to every corner of the throne room. You put a mortal's needs above the good of your court. You've given her power and influence she hasn't earned. King Darius of the Night Court believes it's time for new leadership in the Shadow Realm. He challenges you to formal combat. Winner takes all territories and titles. The court erupted in chaos, vampires shouting, arguing, some supporting the challenge and others condemning it. Mira felt ice in her veins. She knew about vampire duels. They were fought to final death, no mercy, no surrender. If Lysander fought and lost, he would die. I accept, Lysander said calmly, his voice cutting through the noise. Silence fell. Tell your king I will meet him in 7 days' time in the neutral ground. And tell him that when I win, I'm claiming his head as a trophy. The emissary bowed mockingly and departed. As soon as he was gone, Lysander's advisors surrounded him, all talking at once, arguing strategy and alliances. Mira sat frozen in her chair beside his throne, terror clawing at her chest. Later, in their private chambers, she confronted him. You can't do this. You can't risk your life because some asshole questioned your choices. I have no choice. To refuse would be to show weakness, to invite every rival court to think they can challenge me without consequence. Lysander cupped her face in his hands. I know you're afraid, but Mira, I've survived 2,000 years of vampire politics. I'm not going to fall to Darius. You don't know that. He's ancient too, isn't he? Powerful? Yes, but I have something he doesn't. I have something to fight for beyond pride and territory. I have you. The 7 days passed in a blur of preparation. Lysander trained constantly, working with his best fighters to ready himself for every possible tactic Darius might use. Mira threw herself into her studies, learning every protection spell she could, every ward and shield that might help him. On the morning of the duel, Lysander dressed in armor that looked like it belonged in a museum, black metal plates etched with silver runes. He was breathtaking and terrifying in equal measure, every inch the warrior king. Don't come to the neutral ground, he told Mira as she helped him fasten the final straps. I don't want you watching this. Absolutely not. I'm coming. You're not doing this without me there. They argued, but she was immovable, and eventually he relented. They traveled together through a portal to the neutral ground, a barren field under a starless sky where vampire courts had settled disputes for millennia. Darius was already there, a massive figure in crimson armor, his white hair braided down his back. He was surrounded by his court, hundreds of vampires who'd come to watch their king claim new territory. Lysander's supporters were fewer but loyal, all of them radiating confidence in their ruler. The fight began with no ceremony, just two ancient vampires colliding with supernatural speed and strength. Mira could barely track their movements as they tore into each other with fangs and claws and blades. Blood sprayed across the barren ground, armor cracked and bent. The sound of their combat was like thunder. Darius was strong, but Lysander was faster. He used his speed to his advantage, landing blow after blow, driving his opponent back. But Darius had experience, cunning, and he was fighting dirty. He pulled weapons Mira didn't recognize, used tricks that had Lysander's supporters shouting foul. When Darius drove a silver blade into Lysander's side, Mira screamed. She felt the pain through their bond, a sharp agony that doubled her over. Lysander staggered, and Darius pressed his advantage, raining down blows that drove the Shadow King to his knees. No, this couldn't happen. Mira wouldn't allow it. She didn't think. She just acted. Words of power poured from her lips, old words her grandmother had taught her, words she'd learned from Cassian. She reached for every scrap of magic in her blood and wove it into a shield, throwing it around Lysander just as Darius raised his blade for a killing blow. The blade struck the shield and shattered. Darius stumbled back, shocked. Lysander surged to his feet, pulling the silver blade from his side and driving it through Darius's throat before the other vampire could recover. It was over in seconds. Darius collapsed, clawing at the silver in his neck, his eyes wide with disbelief. Lysander stood over him, breathing hard, blood streaming from a dozen wounds. "You lose," Lysander said simply, and twisted the blade. Darius dissolved into ash. The rival court stood in stunned silence. Then one by one they knelt, acknowledging Lysander's victory and superiority. The Shadow King had won. Lysander turned to Mira, and the look in his golden eyes stole her breath. Pride and love and wonder all mixed together. He crossed to her, ignoring his wounds, and pulled her into his arms. "You saved me," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You broke the rules of the duel, interfered in a fight to the death. You could have been killed for that. I don't care. I wasn't going to let him hurt you." Tears streamed down her face. "I love you. I couldn't lose you. I love you too." The words came without hesitation, without doubt. "I love you, Mira Ashford. My heart beats for you. My immortal existence has meaning because you're in it. I love you." He kissed her there in front of both courts, in front of everyone who'd come to witness the duel, and Mira kissed him back with everything she had. When they finally parted, his wounds were already healing, his vampire nature knitting flesh and bone back together. "Take me home," Mira whispered. They returned to the Shadow Court to celebrations that lasted 3 days. Lysander's victory had solidified his power, and Mira's magical intervention had earned her respect from even the most skeptical vampires. She was no longer just the king's human pet. She was his partner, his chosen, powerful in her own right. A month later, Lysander made it official. He called a formal court and, in front of everyone, offered Mira a choice. "You can remain human," he said, holding her hand as they stood before his throne. "Live out your natural life with me, and I will cherish every moment we have. Or I can turn you, make you vampire, make you immortal, make you my equal in all ways. The choice is entirely yours. I will love you regardless." Mira looked out at the assembled court, at Seraphine and Cassian and all the others who'd become her friends. She thought about the life she'd left behind, the woman who'd been trapped in a cellar waiting to die. That Mira was gone. This new Mira was strong, powerful, loved. This new Mira had found a home and a purpose. "Turn me," she said clearly. "I want forever with you." The ceremony was beautiful. Lysander drank from her as he had so many times before, but this time he didn't stop until her heart slowed, until darkness crept into her vision. Then he opened his own wrist and pressed it to her lips, letting his ancient blood flow into her. The transformation was agony and ecstasy combined. She felt her body dying and being reborn simultaneously, felt every cell changing, adapting, becoming something more than human. When she finally opened her eyes again, the world had transformed. Colors were more vivid, sounds sharper, and she could feel the immense power flowing through her veins. And Lysander's heartbeat, strong and steady, perfectly in sync with her own newly beating heart. She was vampire, she was immortal, she was free. They married in a ceremony that blended vampire tradition with human custom. Mira wearing a gown of silver that matched her new white hair, Lysander in formal regalia that made him look like the king he was. They exchanged vows that would last for eternity, promising to love and cherish and protect each other through all the long centuries ahead. Mira kept her promise to herself. She became an advocate for mortals in the vampire realm, creating protections and laws that ensured humans who bonded with vampires were treated with respect and fairness. She helped other survivors of abuse find safety and new purpose. She used her power for good, to help others the way Lysander had helped her. And every night she fell asleep in Lysander's arms, safe and loved and home. Sometimes she thought about that cellar, about the desperate woman who'd whispered a name in the darkness hoping for salvation. She'd gotten so much more than she'd bargained for. She'd gotten a second chance at life, at love, at becoming the person she was always meant to be. She'd gotten everything. Years passed into decades, decades into centuries. The world changed around them, but their love remained constant. They faced challenges together, fought enemies side by side, built a court that was known for being just and fair. They traveled to the human world regularly, watched it evolve, helped guide it in small ways. And every morning, when they returned to their chambers in the Shadow Court, Lysander would pull Mira close and press his hand to her chest, feeling her heart beat in perfect rhythm with his own. "I love you," he would say, the words he'd learned from her, the emotion she'd taught him to feel. "I love you too," she would answer, always and forever. They had eternity together. And it started in a cellar with a whispered name, and a vampire king who learned to love.